I won't do that. How many of you found yourselves saying that at some point? I won't do that. Oh, we all have these relationships in our lives where we say, I love you so much, whether it's family, whether it's a sports team. Maybe you're married and you said, I'm having to hold for as long as we live, till death do we part. And then you have that moment where you've had a long day at work, you come home, you shuttle the kids from one place to another, and you get home, you eat dinner, and your wife asks you to take out the trash. And you find yourself saying, honey, I love you, but I won't do that. Or maybe you're the wife and your husband says, honey, my feet are really sore. Maybe you could, honey, I love you, but I won't do that. Or maybe you've recently retired, you've punched your time card for years, and finally your to-do list is to-done list. And you are excited about doing nothing, thinking about nothing, and one of your adult children says, would you mind taking our kids to school in the morning and then watching them for a while afterwards? And you say, oh, honey, I love you, but I won't do that. Or maybe you've been a season ticket holder for years. You're so committed to this team that you've got their mascot tattooed to your arm. And if you're lucky, you even get the tab picked up for you at the end of the night some places. But then the ownership makes some strange choices. A losing season turns into a losing half decade. And then ticket prices go up, and you find yourself saying to the team you love, I love you, but I won't do that. Nobody likes talking about the limits of love, but we all have them. That moment that what we love starts to be outweighed by the cost it's going to have in our life or the sacrifice we're going to need to make when that scale starts to shift. I was talking with some friends of mine that are missionaries, and I was asking them recently why they decided to be in the mission field and what they think it takes for someone to go into the mission field. And their answer was, it's all about what you value. If a person values their faith, or if a church values the Great Commission, going out and sharing God's love with others, they're going to talk about it. And if they talk about it, it's going to become who they are. And if it's who you are, it just makes sense. Some of you might remember Jeremy and Eileen Myers. They've gone to church here for a long time before moving out to the West Coast. Just an incredible family. Well, this morning they're waking up in Jamaica. They and their two young daughters that are my kids' age are in a different country, committed to sharing God's love with everyone in every way they can. And I know if we asked them, wait a second, that's crazy. What are you doing? They would say, no, it's not. This makes total sense. And that's what my friends who are in the mission field answered. They said, well, no, this is our faith. It makes total sense. To a lot of us, it sounds crazy, but to someone who has made it their life purpose, it makes complete sense because of love. What they love is far greater than whatever cost they might experience along the way. Most of us, if we're honest, have found ourselves saying something like that at some point in their lives. We say something like, God, I love you, but please don't tell me to be a missionary. I won't do that. God, I love you, but please don't have the youth pastor ask me to help with junior high students. Why are you laughing, man? I won't do that. God, I love you, but please, could you just give me someone a little bit more normal for a neighbor? God, I love you, but I'm not going to let my family know that I'm going to church now because I don't want to deal with the ridicule. I'm not going to do that. God, I love you, but I'm not going to let my coworkers know that I'm a Christian because I like this job and I want these people to like me too. I won't do that. God, I love you, but I'm not going to do that. It's awkward. It's an open secret for most of us in our relationship with God that we love God, but there are a whole lot of things in our lives that we find ourselves saying, I'm not going to do that. In 1 Corinthians 9, Paul talks about that open secret, but he goes the opposite way of comfort, or what is natural, or what is easy for the sake of others knowing Christ. Last week, Bart was talking about making personal sacrifices so that our brothers and sisters in the faith, in the church, don't get tripped up. Well, this morning in chapter 9, Paul is talking about the price he's willing to pay the lengths he's willing to go, not for those that are in the church, but for those he hasn't even met, the people he doesn't even know yet. He is willing to pay the highest of costs to reach them because of his love for God. We're going to pick up in verse 19 of chapter 9. You can read along with me. 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. All things to all people, so that by all possible means I might win some. That right there is the mission statement, the vision statement for Paul's life. Everything he said and did, the way he conducted himself publicly and privately, the places that he went, the things that he did is all summed up in that verse. I became all things to all people so that by all means possible I might save some. He spends the first 14 verses of chapter 9 explaining why he deserves a paycheck from the church in Corinth. The first section of this is all about him laying out an explanation of why his credentials are good. And it sounds like he's entering into a contract negotiation. It looks like at the beginning of chapter 9 that he's about to make this financial request of the church in Corinth. Because he's saying everybody's worth their work. A worker deserves to be paid. Somebody deserves to be fed for what they do. But then after those first 14 verses, he says, I have every reason to be compensated, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to become all things for all people, so that by all possible means, I might win some. He's saying, whatever it takes, wherever it takes me, and whoever I get the chance to reach, that's what I'm all about. It wasn't just to win his friends either. Look how this passage ends. It ends with him saying it is for the sake of the gospel. Why is he sharing it? It has to do with the goodness of God. Why was he willing to go through the social gymnastics for complete strangers? He wanted them to know the good news. You look at the examples he lists here in the middle of chapter 9, and you see he's ready to reach out to people that thought like him and people that didn't think like him. People that looked like him and people that didn't look like him. Even the people that he disagreed with, he was willing to make sacrifices, whatever it took, to reach them all. And this is not some new idea cooked up by Paul. This is something that's intrinsic, that is woven into the fabric of every teaching of Jesus. If you look over in Luke 15, and you see Jesus teaching a crowd and addressing his disciples, you'll see him telling a story, and he asks a question that everybody would have screamed out the answer to because it was an obvious answer. Jesus asked the crowd what they would do if they had 100 sheep and they realized at the end of the day that one of them was missing. So the shepherd is counting all of them as they come back into the pen, and he gets to 99 and he's missing that 100th sheep. And so Jesus says, what would the shepherd do? And it's one of those questions that culturally didn't even necessitate an answer. It was obvious. He's going to leave. He's going to go to the one. And you go, why would that be common sense? Why would that be so obvious? And it's because 99 are inside the fence. 99 of them are inside the pen. They're not going anywhere. They're safe. They're secure. They're well fed. They're good. Why is the shepherd leaving the 99 for the one? Because that one is not good. That one is not fed. That one is not safe. And he's going to go and do whatever it takes to bring them back, to go get them and let them know that there's something better. Jesus finishes up that story in Luke 15:7 by saying, I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Do you hear that, Parkside? Heaven throws a bigger party when a family comes to know Jesus than when we get together and worship here on a Sunday morning. Think about that for just a moment. I love coming here on a Sunday morning. I look forward to coming here on a Sunday morning and singing and worshiping and learning and spending time in prayer and in fellowship with each other, in relationship with each other. But what makes heaven get out the party favors? What makes them break things open and say, let's celebrate? It's not a Sunday morning service. It's not hundreds of people having good church attendance. It's when that one person who was lost comes home. When that one person who was in danger finds safety in the flock. Now, that might rub you the wrong way, but imagine for just a moment going to your neighbor, your coworker, your family member, and telling them they aren't worth it. That they aren't worth your time, your energy, or your investment, even though the Bible that you believe is inspired by God himself says that they are more than worth investing all you have. That's a tough conversation, right? You're not going to say that. And it's because you value them and because God values them. Now, I know this story in Luke chapter 15 is not a math equation, and I am in no shape or form a mathematician. But if you look at this, Jesus throwing a bigger party in heaven for one that comes to know him than the 99 that are safe inside the flock. Think about that for just a second. You could come to church for almost 2 years straight, perfect attendance. And God is going to look at that, and he's going to look at somebody that you lead to Christ, somebody that you lead to knowing Jesus, and he's going to say, I get more excited about that. I'm going to throw the bigger party over somebody being found than you being able to get the gold star for being here. That's how much God values the lost. If we're going to value what God values and invest in what God invests and reach the people who don't know him yet, it's going to take all of us. And it just can't be a weekend hobby. It has to be a committed and daily effort from all of us. I was reading a Christian researcher, and he explained that the culture is changing, and it's going to take us being more relational, being out there more. He explained it this way: that the church's realm of influence is shrinking. In short, it used to be easier to reach people who don't have a relationship with Jesus. Think about it this way. You've got the church, and you've got the people that are committed to church, and you've got people that are receptive, people that you might invite, and they'd go, oh, I've been to church before. What's your church like? Or, yeah, I love what the church does. I love your programs. I've heard about them. That's incredible. And then you have people further out in the community that are just neutral. They honestly just don't think of church. It's not like Sunday morning they think, should I go? Maybe. Well, no, I'm a little late. They just don't think about church or about God at all. It's not a priority for them. They don't feel like something is missing in their life. And then you have in that far, far circle a group of people that are just closed to the gospel, closed to Jesus, closed to religion, the idea of God. You might even call them antagonistic. It's not that they're unreachable. It's that they're in opposition to what the church stands for. That they're going, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want to be involved. I don't care. And it used to be that most of the people you would come in contact with on a daily basis, the world that most of us grew up in, most of us were committed or receptive. It was like, hey, yeah, this is great. Or even most of the people, you might invite them and go, you know what, it's not for me, but that's great that you're doing that. But what has happened is the circle of committed and receptive people is shrinking, and it's not just the neutral circle that's growing, it's the closed circle that's growing too. And so what we did as a church in the past that worked really well, it's not that it's wrong now. It's just not going to be received in the same way. And what you were able to do with your neighbors or your family or your coworkers that might have worked really well, it's changing. And so the people that we think have this felt need, this desire to go to church, we're going, hey, you should come to church. And they're going, I'm sorry, could you tell me more about this? And it's just not something they're thinking about at all. That's not saying that these people can't be reached. They absolutely can be, and we need to be reaching out to them in real, meaningful ways. It's just not going to come as easy as what you might be used to. It's going to take more than an invitation. It is going to take building relationships, investing in things that they're passionate about, and making the way we do church easier for them to connect to so they can begin to see and experience the goodness of God. That's going to cause us to stretch ourselves and move ourselves in ways we aren't used to, or maybe in ways that we're not even interested in. And I'm not talking about on an us level. I'm talking about a you and me level. There's going to be things that really don't interest you, don't excite me, but we're going to come in contact with somebody that we say, this person needs God's love. This person needs to know Jesus. And if you don't take an interest in them, if you don't take an interest in what they're interested in, you're never going to be able to tell them about how good God is. And that's going to stretch us. It would be natural for us to resist this calling or gripe about it. Now, be honest. How many of you have ever done something, but you've griped and complained the entire time? Right? Some of you are like, well, that's my week. That's my job. That's the world and I live in. It's not fun. If you do something that you're not excited about and you complain about it the whole time, you're miserable. It makes it worse. And it sucks the life out of things. I recently had the opportunity to do the memorial service for Alicia, my wife's grandmother. Her name was Eleanor Cameron, and she was a military wife. Her husband, Carl, was a colonel in the military. And so they traveled everywhere. And that's just the military life. If you're a military kid, you know what that life is all about. You pack your bags all the time, and you head on to the next adventure. In fact, when Eleanor and Carl got married, they got moved and stationed in Tripoli in Libya. And so she, freshly married, had to get on a cargo military plane, fly all day, get there at night, and in the darkness of night, they had to go to this apartment that she had never been to. And her husband, Carl, turns to her and says, honey, when I open this door, pick up your bags and run up the stairs. She's like, okay, what's this all about? They open the door, and there's cockroaches and rats everywhere. And she grabs the bags, and she runs up the stairs. And what does Carl say to her next? Honey, when I open this door, pick up your bags and run. It's great. I'm really rethinking this whole marriage thing, right? What have I got myself into? And so she does. The door opens, and there's rats, and there's cockroaches, and she runs up the stairs, and there's one last door. And they think that it's a door into this is our apartment. And they open it, and they're greeted by wild chicken all over the place. Chicken had somehow snuck into their apartment and were living in their apartment. And so what did Eleanor do? Did she pick up her bags and run out of town? Did she mope? Did she complain? No. She served a Christmas dinner for other officers and their wives and their families, even though she was in a strange place that she had never been, and it was probably a completely miserable situation for her. And her kids, in the memorial service, describe her in that way. They say, my mom made all the difference because whether it was an air raid, whether it was an evacuation, no matter what the situation was, my mom treated it like an adventure, and she was excited about it. And so we were excited about it, and we knew we could make it through. That's what it's going to take. We're going to have to embrace this calling, even if it makes us uncomfortable. For Paul, becoming all things to all people took him all over the world. So what's it going to look like for Parkside, and what's it going to look like for each of us sitting here this morning? Some of my favorite conversations here at Parkside might be a conversation that you wouldn't expect for me to enjoy. I love a conversation that actually starts off in kind of a scary way for me here. Every now and then I'll get pulled aside by somebody from the more senior generation here at Parkside, and they'll say, Matt, can I talk to you? And I'll go, oh, what did I do? I did something wrong. And I'll try and think through, and they'll say, Matt, I don't like the music. And I'll go, oh, no. I start looking for a door. Where can I go? And they'll say, it's too loud, too. And I'll go, okay. And I'm thinking, how can I make this a positive conversation? They say, yeah, really, honestly, a lot of the service can be weird for us sometimes. But then they turn the corner in that conversation, And they say something incredible. They say, but I know what it's for, and I know why we do it, and I know that it might make it possible for somebody that doesn't know Jesus to meet Jesus. And if that's what it's about, then I'm all about it. I tell you, if we could take a page out of that book, if we could take the heart that they have in that moment and say that's going to be us too, that we're not going to go, well, did I like it? Like, what was it for? Was there a purpose for this? Yeah, there was. Was this so that people could know Jesus? Yeah, it was. Then I'm going to be excited about it. I'm going to embrace it and go into it going, yeah, this is not about me. The reality is a lot of churches do church in a way that even when we invite people, they don't want to come. Imagine if instead of it being inviting people to church, it was inviting people for dinner at your house. How would that look differently? If it wasn't you inviting somebody into this building, but inviting somebody into your house for dinner. Here's what I think it might be for some people if inviting them to church became inviting them to dinner. Your neighbor comes over, knocks on the door, nobody answers. They knock again. Finally, the door kind of just opens on its own. They kind of creep in. And everybody's talking to somebody else. Nobody greets them, right? And they're like, I'm pretty sure that this was the day that I was invited over for dinner. I'm pretty sure this is the place. They step out, check the address again. Yeah, this is the place. And then finally they find their way to the dinner table because everybody else starts to go to the dinner table. And they sit down in a seat only to have somebody say, that's my seat. And you're like, you invited me here. You told me to come. And so the person gets up and moves down, and finally they've got to get another chair. And they've got to go pick up that chair themselves, and they join a table, and the meal starts, and everybody put their heads down for a little bit, and I don't know what that was about. And so they're uncomfortable, but finally the food starts getting passed, and they go, you know what, I'm going to pass on the vegetables. And they start to get an extra serving of mashed potatoes as it comes by. And somebody at the table slaps their hand. And they go, I don't know where you're from, but that's not the way we do it around here. And if you don't like it, you can go eat somewhere else. And at this point, the person's going, why did they invite me into their house? Why did they invite me to come in if this is what was going to happen? And then the meal's done and everybody gets up and leaves. And this person is just bewildered. Like, do I go now? What's going on? That sounds crazy, but that's the experience a lot of people in culture have when they visit a church for the first time. They don't know where to go. They don't feel welcome. And even something as simple as finding a place to sit can be tough. What's it going to look like for us to become all things for all people so that by all means we can win some? What's it going to take for us to make Parkside, wherever it is, whether it's in our community or it's here in this building, feel like a dinner that somebody's been invited to and that they want to come back to? It's not going to look like you. It's not going to look like me. It's going to be all of us reaching out. Have you ever tried to grab something that's just out of reach? You don't stretch out and go, oh, this is so much fun. Oh, this is great. You've got to reach. You've got to reach a little bit more. You've got to hope that you could dislocate your shoulder, and you've got to move. You've got to go beyond what you are doing right now to reach that. What's it going to take for all of us to get to the point where we understand that our workplace is a mission field given to us by God? How can we start to realize and live in a way that we treat our neighborhood like a mission field where we can make a spiritual investment? Why don't we find ourselves more regularly and naturally sharing the good news of Jesus with others when we have so clearly experienced it? It's going to take us to family, to work, to our neighbors, and to daily, seemingly random conversations where we just feel the leading of the Spirit to say, can I tell you something? Can I tell you something about my day? We are going to start needing to rewire the power grids of our minds so that every conversation goes back to Jesus and that we're led by the Spirit in those conversations. We need to become the people that in every conversation they know that at some point we're just going to mention God's goodness in our lives. Be the person that your coworkers say, I don't know about this whole religion thing, but man, if Jesus is anything like them, sign me up. I went to an Ohio State football game with my dad when I was about 10 years old. and I was excited and looking forward to it. And while we were at Ohio State, we walked around campus for a little bit. And while we were on campus, we walked across the Oval. And if you've ever been to Ohio State University, the Oval is crazy because the sidewalk pattern makes no sense. You look at it and you go, what? And so I'm a 10-year-old and I go, Dad, why do the sidewalks look like this? And he goes, well, Matt, it's because they waited to lay the sidewalks. They waited to see where people walked, and that's where they put the sidewalks. We need to be a church that waits to see where our culture walks, and we pave it with the gospel. That we see where people are going, where people are hurting, and we say, that's where we're going to be. Because the sidewalks we've laid down Parkside, there's nothing wrong with them, but if people don't walk on them, they're not going to know God's goodness. And so the sidewalks that we paved 5 years ago won't work today, and the sidewalks we're putting down today aren't going to work 5 years from now. And so we've got to be that company that's out there watching and going, hey, people are walking over here. How can we get a sidewalk to there? So that people can meet Jesus. We're going to get this, Parkside. We're going to get this, and once we get it, we're going to have to get it again. Because it's not something you take hold of. It's something that you practice. And you've got to take hold of it every day. Imagine a Parkside that becomes all things for all people. Who would be sitting next to you this morning? Who would be in your life group? Who would be joining you shoulder to shoulder, answering the challenge to serve in your community? Which of your neighbors, friends, family members, boss, coworkers would be saying, I never thought I would be the kind of person to go to church, but I'm so thankful that you helped me understand who Jesus is and what life is really about. Imagine for just a second, Parkside, that Jesus had decided he wouldn't do this. We started off the service saying, I won't do that. We all have areas in our faith where we won't do that. Imagine if Jesus sat in heaven and said, I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that. He said, you know what? I like heaven. I like the position I have. I'm not going to do that. The truth of it is, Parkside, that he did say, I won't do that. But the thing that he said he won't do is that he will never leave us or forsake us. And so when you're nervous about going somewhere, when you're nervous about saying something, remember that Jesus said, I won't do that. I won't leave you or forsake you. And the challenge that he has for us, the mission that he has for us, is for us to not leave or abandon our families, our neighbors, our coworkers. And we've got to ask ourselves the question, are we going to do that?